Good evening, dear colleagues, or good morning or good afternoon, whenever you watch my video. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching my video. My name is Ákos, Gocsál, and I work in Hungary, in Pécs. Here's a map, perhaps for you who may not know about my town where I work. This is Pécs, and this is the main square of Pécs. I work here in the Institute of Music of the university, and I'm also a researcher in Budapest, in the Hungarian Research Institute for Linguistics. So my topic will be about a very special aspect of transfer effects of music learning. Of course, everybody who deals with music is familiar with the concept of transfer effects of music learning. There are many different fields that has been researched into these fields to assess possible transfer effects of music learning. And these fields include literacy or mathematical skills or memory or intellectual development. There are a lot of different and very exciting fields. I just collected these ideas, and this is not the whole spectrum of these fields. So I just collected these ideas from this book here. Yes. These two authors have published just recently a very interesting and very exciting book about transfer effects. So this is a summary of recent findings and recent trends, and this book includes these fields and many other fields. So for those who are interested in reading this, I really recommend it. It is available for free on the internet. You can find it. Now, the main field that I am interested in is the oral perception, basically listening, hearing skills. And the main question in this field is if musicians are better at listening to different types of sounds or acoustic stimuli when we compare their auditory processing skills to the non-musicians. So when people research this kind of problems and examine these hypotheses, they normally have two groups of listeners, musicians and non-musicians, and they listen to the same acoustic stimuli, the same sounds, basically, and the individual decide if the two sounds, if the sounds are different or the same. And finally, the researchers evaluate the answers, and they decide on a statistical basis if musicians outperform non-musicians. So if their listening skills or auditory processing skills are more sophisticated or not. This is something that I have done, but there is a very important note about research methodology, because this is a cross-sectional research, cross-sectional study design, which means that it's like a snapshot, just at the very moment, this is the situation, but we cannot infer the reasons, the causes that result in the results that we found. So this requires certain attention when we evaluate results. Now, I'd like to show some of the main findings, or some findings that other researchers have found in this field. For example, some people found that the musicians are better at the discrimination of pure tones, the sine tones, sine waves. Some other people found that temporal interval discrimination skills are better at musicians. Or timbre discrimination skills are better, and so on. There are many more. Other researchers have used spoken stimuli, basically speech, and there are also very interesting research results which suggest that musicians have more sophisticated capacities to discriminate pitch changes in the intonation curve of speech, or pitch violations, or musicians are better at understanding speech in noise, and many other findings are available in this field too. Usually researchers are interested in speech understanding, the understanding of the message of the speaker, of the sender, but this is not the only field that can be researched. A very well-known phonetician, John Laver, said that speech includes three main semiotic layers. It means that information is not only conveyed or transferred on a linguistic channel in speech, but there are two other so-called channels or layers encoded in speech. In addition to the linguistic layer, the linguistic message, there are paralinguistic signs, which means that there are some emotional and affective factors, affective contents in speech that are encoded, and the listener can decode it. You can feel the emotional state of the speaker when you listen to him or her, or you can feel the intention of the speaker. So this is non-linguistic, this is paralinguistic. And the third layer is extra-linguistic, which means that together with the linguistic part and the paralinguistic part, you can have an idea about the speaker's gender, the speaker's age, maybe the speaker's health status, maybe the speaker's body configuration, and many other characteristics of the speaker which are independent of the linguistic message. So when we understand that speech does not only encode a linguistic message, but there are several other aspects or several other pieces of information encoded in speech, we can extend our idea of speech perception, which means that we do not talk only about understanding speech or understanding the verbal contents or elements of the verbal contents, but we also talk about decoding the paralinguistic aspects, the motivational, emotional aspects encoded in speech, and also we can decode some personal characteristics, or at least infer certain characteristics of the speaker. And now, having said this, we can get back to the original question of transfer effects that I've been dealing with. This is the question of the advantage of music learning in these processes. I mean, are musicians more accurate in estimating speaker characteristics? So this is the main idea. Here's another author, Robert Krauss, who as a social psychologist, he wrote this very interesting these very interesting sentences, especially concerning this last idea that I was talking about, the perception of the extra linguistic layer of speech, which means that we decode, we try to imagine the other person when we hear their voice, and this means that sometimes we are really surprised to see somebody who is talking, whose voice is familiar, but we are really surprised to see in reality, because we had completely different mental images about the person. So let's see now the main questions, and the question is if musicians have better mental images about the speaker when they hear the voice of the unseen speaker, with special attention to the body configuration, the body size parameters. So sometimes we have an idea about the speaker's body sizes. We can, perhaps we think that a low-voiced person with a very deep voice can be a big one or not. Who knows? So we just I just tried to figure out if such phenomenon exists at all, and if it does, then are these estimations, body parameter estimations by musicians and non-musicians, do they differ, and are musicians better at these kind of estimations and mental images, constructing mental images about the speaker when they hear the voice of a person? Oh yes, these are some illustrations. When we hear somebody's voice through the telephone or the radio, for example, we may have some ideas. So this is these are the methods and materials for my research. There were 24 speakers. I used spontaneous speech recordings. They were emotionally neutral, and I also got the speaker's height and weight, and I also calculated body mass index. And I had 85 students from the university. 42 were musicians and 43 were non-musicians. And I asked them to estimate the height and the weight of the speaker, and I also calculated body mass index. This is part of a larger project in which I asked several other things, also the age. So it was mainly about age estimation, but these questions were also included in this research. Let's see the results. So first result is about height estimations, and this scatter plot graph shows the association of the real height of the speaker and, for each speaker, the mean value of the estimations. And this red line is the regression line fit on these dots, and this dotted line is the y equals x line, which means that if they had been accurate, then the dots were around this line. So this was the main trend, with all of the listeners treated as one group. I calculated the correlation coefficient, and for all listeners, and also separately for male and female musicians and non-musicians. And as you can see here, I got good correlations. I mean, for all listeners altogether, I had a significant correlation. For male musicians, female musicians, and male non-musicians, I got correlation. And even the female non-musicians almost reached the level of significance, the 0.05. So I can say that they have the people have a good sense to judge who is taller and who is shorter when they hear the voice of somebody. This doesn't mean, this has nothing to do with accuracy. This only gives, this correlation means that shorter people were judged as shorter, and taller people were judged as taller, and that's it. It has nothing to do with accuracy. So I calculated accuracy as well, and here I calculated the difference between the actual and estimated height for each of the speaker and each of the listeners, and I run a mixed ANOVA, and I didn't get a significant model, but there was again an almost significant interaction between gender and musicianship. And I created this table about the estimated marginal means, which tells us that the value which is closer to 0, it is the better estimation, because it means that there is a smaller difference between the actual and estimated height. So the closer to zero, the better the estimations are. So the female musicians were better, and the female non-musicians were so-called the least accurate in this. But again, this is not significant, but almost significant. I can say that there's a trend which suggests that female non-musicians were had less accurate estimations, and female musicians were more accurate. But again, this is only a trend, and this was not significant. Let's see the second question about weight estimations. As you can see, I don't have a diagram about this, only the results. As you can see, it is not convincing at all, but male musicians performed significantly. So the male musicians were able to decide by the speech who is fatter and who is thinner. All speakers were males, actually, man. It didn't make any sense to run a mixed ANOVA because here in the previous table you can see that there was no trend like in the previous in the results 1 section, so it wouldn't make any sense. I actually, in the paper I tried it to check if accuracy differs, but because here we didn't find any significant pattern other than for male musicians, we cannot compare male musicians to the other groups because they are. It seems that this is absolutely zero. So it seems that female non-musicians were absolutely puzzled about the weight estimations. So basically, the fact that there was no significant model in this mixed ANOVA, not even close to the level of significance, it says that actually there's nothing to find. No significant result. I also used this, calculated this BMI, the body mass index. It was even worse. So because it was believed that, we believe that perhaps BMI reflects a good sense of body configuration or body sizes. It may be a good parameter, but finally it turned out that it doesn't work like that. So we don't have significant results, but male musicians approached this 0.05, and of course again it doesn't make too much sense to run a mixed ANOVA, but I did it and it confirms that there's nothing to find. One interesting result is, however, that when we compare these estimations across the groups and we calculate estimations and the correlations between the groups, I received very strong associations. If we look at the four subgroups, a male musician, male non-musician, female musician, female. If you compare or these groups estimations or run a correlation algorithm, it seemed that at least 0.774 was the R value we had when we compared any of the two subgroups. So these results reflect the idea that we all have some shared stereotypes based on the voice quality. So there is so things are not randomly decided. It very much looks like, or we have some commonly built ideas about body configuration. So we associate certain vocal qualities to certain body sizes, but they are absolutely inaccurate in many cases. So these are the conclusions. We found some differences. Usually male and female musicians perform better, and non-musician females had less accurate estimations. So these are perhaps the most important results. But I found some non-significant trends as well. So probably some mechanisms that were not significant. They may not be randomly distributed, but there may be some underlying mechanisms in those cases too. So absolutely, it very much seems that we should do some more research. And the basic idea of the whole thing is that perhaps if musicians turn out to be better at social perception, at estimating other people's characteristics based on the voice, then perhaps this may determine their attitudes. This may somehow influence their attitudes towards the other people and influence their decisions, which may contribute to the development of certain social competences. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, this is the end of my presentation. I hope you found some quite interesting. Here are the papers that I have quoted here, and thank you so much for your presentation. Normally when I present not online but in reality. So thank you again, and if you have any questions or comments, please write, and I would be very happy to answer your questions.